They say everything goes quiet in the moment before impact, but I still remember the shattering glass and his voice calling my name. I thought that voice was saving me. I didn't know it would follow me long after the crash. When I woke, the world was muffled, wrapped in white and the faint smell of antiseptic. My face throbbed in a way I could barely describe, as if every nerve was on fire. A soft beep echoed beside me, and the rhythm of it somehow matched the pounding in my chest. I wanted to move, to touch my face, but even lifting a hand felt like climbing a mountain. And then I saw Evan. My husband. His hair was disheveled, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, yet there was that familiar gentleness in the way he held my hand. "You're awake," he whispered, voice low, almost breaking. You're going to be okay." I tried to speak, but the words came out as a hoarse rasp. "What happened?" His hand tightened slightly. "You lost control, Clara. You hit the railing. That's all." There it was. A simple explanation. But his eyes, I couldn't look away. There was a flicker of something hidden, a hesitation that made my stomach twist into knots. Something unsaid. Something he wasn't telling me. Days passed, or maybe weeks, I couldn't tell anymore. Time had lost its rhythm. The hospital smelled the same every morning, antiseptic, flowers from well-meaning visitors, the faint lingering scent of disinfectant that never quite left my hair or clothes. Nurses came and went. I learned how to sit up again, how to swallow food without choking, how to open my mouth to speak without wincing at the pain that spiked across my jaw and cheeks. And through it all, Evan never left. He was always there, feeding me sips of water, adjusting my pillows, brushing stray hair from my forehead. But even in those moments of care, there was a distance I couldn't name. Something behind his eyes that whispered of secrets too heavy to carry. When the nurse finally came in to say I could go home, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Home sounded comforting, but it also sounded permanent, like stepping back into a world I no longer recognized. I listened to the doctor, a kind woman with tired eyes, explaining the final instructions, her voice calm but precise. "You'll need to continue wound care twice a day," she said, gesturing to the bandages around my face. "The swelling will reduce slowly, but the scars will be permanent. Physical therapy for your jaw and neck, and most importantly," she paused, meeting my eyes with gentle gravity. "Emotionally, this is going to be a difficult recovery. Don't be surprised if you feel anxiety, depression, or panic. That is normal. You've experienced trauma." I nodded, trying to absorb each word, but my mind drifted to the reflection I would eventually see at home, to the face I barely recognized through the bandages. The doctor continued, "You'll also need follow-up appointments frequently for the next few months. Any signs of infection, please contact us immediately. And remember, healing takes time, on the outside and the inside." Her words sounded comforting and terrifying all at once. Healing on the outside? I could see the bandages. I could feel the bruising. But healing on the inside? That felt like a mountain I wasn't sure I had the strength to climb. By the time I was wheeled to the car, the late afternoon sunlight spilled across the hospital parking lot. I felt dizzy as the world shifted through the windows, the brightness painful against my bruised eyes. Evan held my hand tightly, the same hand that had never left my side in the hospital, and I felt a brief flicker of gratitude mixed with the shadow of something unspoken. The ride home was quiet. I focused on the passing trees, the blur of cars, anything to distract myself from the fear tightening in my chest. Each bump in the road made my jaw throb, reminding me of the fragility of what had been done to me and what I had survived. When we arrived at the house, Evan gently helped me inside, guiding me to the sofa where soft pillows had been arranged. I looked around at the familiar furniture, the photographs lining the walls, snapshots of a life I used to know. And yet, the walls of our house felt different. Every room was the same, familiar, but it wasn't my home anymore. It was a house of shadows and mirrors, and I barely recognized myself. My reflection, once a woman who smiled easily, whose laughter echoed through these rooms, now startled me. I avoided mirrors. Draped sheets over reflective surfaces. Each glimpse of my scarred face was a reminder of fragility. I realized then that I wasn't just carrying scars on my face. I was carrying the memory of a night that had rewritten everything I thought I knew. Amid all this, the police were still investigating the accident, asking questions, checking reports, and following up on leads, but Evan insisted I shouldn't worry about the police investigation. "Everything's taken care of," he said, his voice calm, but a subtle tremor betrayed him. I wanted to believe him, but the longer I stayed home, the more the silence pressed against my ears. At night, I would hear him whispering in the kitchen, muffled voices on his phone, the sound of someone talking low and urgent. The pattern didn't fit with anything I knew. And slowly, fear crept in. What was he hiding? Was it another woman? Someone he had found while I was lying in the hospital, vulnerable and broken? Was it me, the scarred, unfamiliar version of myself, that he could no longer look at with love? The questions clawed at my chest, refusing to let me breathe. Each thought twisted inside me like a knife, leaving me dizzy with fear and heartbreak. Every night, my mind spun through possibilities, each darker than the last. I felt like a stranger in my own home, trapped behind my own skin, watching the man I loved move through rooms I barely recognized. And then, one morning, it arrived. A small, white envelope. It was tucked under the door, folded neatly. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. "Does he ever tell you the truth about that night?" I held it in my trembling hands for what felt like hours. My stomach turned cold. Who would write this? And what truth were they talking about? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling that had once seen laughter, arguments, the quiet hum of domestic life. Now it just felt oppressive, heavy, like the weight of the unknown pressed down on my chest. Evan slept beside me, or at least, I assumed he did. I could hear the shallow rise and fall of his breathing. But even that seemed distant, almost foreign. I wanted answers, but I was too afraid to speak. Fear had a strange way of rooting itself inside you, making you doubt your own perceptions. Perhaps I was imagining the whispers. Perhaps I was projecting my fears onto him. But my gut told me otherwise. In the following days, I started to notice more inconsistencies. Small things, bills for legal consultations that Evan never mentioned, a mail envelope from a law office that he quickly hid, his sudden departures in the middle of the night. Every subtle act piled onto the last, forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. I began to watch him. Not like a wife distrustful of her husband, but like a detective hunting the shadows in her own life. And the more I watched, the more I felt a gnawing certainty. He was hiding something. I tried to talk to him about it. Carefully. Tentatively. But every question, every small probe, met with a gentle deflection or a sigh that carried more weight than words could express. "You're overthinking," he would say, brushing a hand over my hair, soft, soothing, yet not meeting my eyes. But I couldn't stop. I had to know. One evening, I followed him quietly. He slipped out of the house, into the cool night. He drove to a part of the city I didn't recognize, stopped the car, and met someone in the shadows. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the exchange, a small envelope, a handshake, tension that made my stomach knot with fear. I returned home, heart pounding, mind racing. I stared at the ceiling that night, tracing the cracks in the plaster with my eyes. Who was he meeting? What did they want? And why did it seem like I was living in someone else's story, not my own? Days blended into weeks. My reflection in mirrors remained hidden. I walked with my head down, avoided sunlight that might reveal the disfigurement, avoided questions from friends and neighbors. My life felt suspended, fragile. And yet, I had to keep moving. I had to keep breathing. Each step, each shallow breath, was a quiet defiance against the chaos around me. One morning, a soft knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find another note, this one simpler, direct, almost cruel in its clarity. The truth is not what it seems. I stared at the paper as if it could speak to me. My hands shook. My chest ached. I realized then that the real pain wasn't just the scars I carried on my face. It was the uncertainty, the betrayal I felt before I even knew its source. Evan came home later that day, exhausted, the shadows under his eyes deeper than before. He didn't speak, didn't acknowledge my tension. He moved silently, almost cautiously, as if aware that I had started piecing things together. I wanted to scream, to confront him, to demand the truth. But the fear, not for myself, but for the fragile threads holding our lives together, kept me silent. Nights became longer than days. Sleep refused to come easily. Every sound, every footstep outside, every faint rustle in the wind was amplified. My mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps he had another woman, perhaps he had been responsible for the crash, perhaps the world I thought I knew was nothing but a fragile illusion. I began writing in secret, journaling my fears, my suspicions, the small details that didn't make sense. Each word on the page was a lifeline, a small attempt to reclaim some part of myself before it was lost completely. Evan's presence in the house became both a comfort and a torment. I wanted to reach for him, to ask, to demand, to cry into his shoulder. And yet, I feared the answer I might hear. Each meal we shared, each shared glance, became a dance of restraint, a battle between the person I wanted him to be and the man I feared he might actually be. Weeks passed. I tried to live normally. I smiled at neighbors, answered calls from friends, carried on as though the world outside my home hadn't shifted entirely. But inside, the storm raged. The quiet moments, tea in the morning, a book in the afternoon, were punctuated by questions I could not answer, fears I could not quell, and a sense of betrayal that had yet to reveal its full form. It was in this suspended state, caught between life before the accident and the unknown future, that I realized I couldn't go on like this. I had to confront the truth. I had to know the secret Evan carried, no matter how much it might break me. Because some things, the truth, the betrayal, the hidden guilt, refused to stay buried forever. The note burned in my hands long after I had folded it and set it on the kitchen table. Its words were simple, but their weight pressed down on me, heavier than any physical pain I had felt since the accident. I couldn't stop thinking about it. My reflection in the windows, once comforting, now stared back with suspicion. Every movement I made, every glance I stole at Evan, was filtered through a fog of doubt. I tried to push the fear away, to convince myself that I was imagining things, that the whispers, the late-night calls, the subtle glances away, were all products of my fragile mind. But the note refused to leave me alone. It was a challenge, a provocation, a call to uncover something I had been too afraid to face. Finally, I decided to act. I needed to see the car. I needed to understand, in the most tangible way possible, what had really happened that night. The garage where it was stored was small and dimly lit, a quiet warehouse tucked behind an unremarkable door. The moment I stepped inside, the smell of oil and metal hit me, strong and sharp, dragging me back into the memory of the crash. I took a shaky breath, my hands trembling as I approached the car. The damage was worse than I remembered. The front bumper was twisted, paint scraped off in jagged lines. Shards of glass lay scattered inside, remnants of a night I barely survived. I circled the vehicle slowly, examining it from every angle. And then I saw it, a small dent on the corner of the bumper. A dent that didn't match the impact from the railing, a dent that suggested another story hidden within the crash. My pulse quickened. I ran my fingers along the indentation, tracing the curve of the metal as if it might whisper its secrets to me. My mind raced through possibilities, rejecting some, fearing others. How could a detail so small be so significant? Why hadn't I noticed it before? My instinct screamed at me that this was a clue, a fragment of a truth Evan had hidden, and perhaps one I wasn't ready to confront. The next step was obvious: the police report. So, the next morning, I forced myself out of bed, the weight of unease pressing against my chest like a stone. The sunlight filtering through the curtains felt harsh, almost accusatory, as if the world itself knew the secrets I hadn't uncovered yet. I dressed carefully, pulling on a jacket to hide the faint tremor in my hands, and made my way to the police station. The building loomed ahead, gray, solid, official, a place I had walked past 1,000 times without a second thought. Today, however, it felt different, cold, intimidating, a threshold to the answers I both desperately sought and feared. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly as I stepped inside, the smell of paper, ink, and faint disinfectant filling the air. Officers moved past me with brisk efficiency, their eyes scanning faces, forms, and documents, unaware of the storm building in my mind. I approached the front desk, clutching the small slip of paper I had been given for inquiries. My voice trembled slightly as I spoke. I'd like to request a copy of the police report for the accident that happened last month. My name is Clara Whitman. The clerk's eyes flicked briefly to the file cabinet behind her, then back at me. Of course, ma'am. You'll need to fill out this form and show identification. She handed me a clipboard with papers that suddenly felt heavier than any I had ever held. I sat in the small waiting area, surrounded by the muted hum of printers, the occasional scrape of chairs, and the soft murmur of conversations that seemed mundane compared to the turmoil churning inside me. Every second felt like a stretch of eternity. I tried to steady my breathing, to calm the racing thoughts: Evan, the note, the dent in the car. Each one demanded attention, and yet, here I was, waiting like a patient for a verdict I feared I couldn't bear. When an officer finally returned with the file, I accepted it with shaking hands, the paper rough against my fingers. As I flipped through the pages, scanning lines and diagrams, most of it was as expected: witness statements, sketches of the crash site, technical assessments of speed and impact. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A line, blacked out with heavy ink, deliberately obscured. The words beneath were forbidden to me for reasons that made no sense. I could feel my fingers trembling as I held the report. Who had the authority to block out a part of this document? And why? The act itself suggested something deliberate, calculated, a secret someone had worked hard to conceal. Evan's words, "everything's taken care of," echoed in my head, but now they carried a new weight. Everything he had taken care of might have been an effort to shield me, or to hide something. Something that would finally reveal what had really happened that night. I returned to the garage several times, examining the car again and again. Every small dent, every scratch, every detail that didn't fit the story he had told me seemed like a piece of a puzzle that refused to be complete. I began to take photographs, document inconsistencies, and compare them to the crash report. I spent nights tracing the lines of impact, studying angles, imagining trajectories. I couldn't stop. My mind, though still recovering from the trauma of the accident and the scars that disfigured my face, had begun to sharpen into something else: determination. I couldn't leave it at that. I needed guidance. I reached out to someone I trusted, someone who had spent decades navigating the intricacies of law and accident investigations. A retired officer, a man named Graham, who had known my family tangentially and whose counsel I had sought before in smaller matters. I explained the situation carefully, choosing my words like a knife through silk. Graham listened, silent, nodding occasionally, and finally said, "Clara, the blacked out line isn't standard. It usually indicates involvement of a party that might be criminally implicated or that someone's identity is being protected for legal reasons. You're going to need to dig carefully and discreetly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Discreetly was the operative word. Every step I had taken toward the truth felt like a tightrope walk, where one wrong move could collapse everything. But I had no choice. My peace, my sense of safety, my identity, all depended on uncovering what had been hidden. Graham helped me access additional records, more obscure than the standard police files. Accident logs, hospital reports, and dispatch notes. And then, finally, a detail that made my blood run cold. There had been a pedestrian involved that night, someone struck by a car, injured severely, and later pronounced dead. The report did not name the driver explicitly, but the chain of custody suggested it wasn't an accident left entirely unexplained. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My hands shook as I read through the documents. I had been lying in the hospital, barely aware of my own survival, while someone else had suffered and died. And the memory of Evan's calm voice, insisting I was the one who caused the crash, took on a sinister edge. Could it really be that he had been protecting me all this time, or was there something darker? The weeks passed with a growing sense of dread. Every phone call Evan took, every whisper I overheard, every sudden departure, became magnified in my mind. Then, I began noticing patterns that I hadn't before. The way Evan glanced at his phone when I entered the room. My anxiety, already frayed by my new appearance, my isolation, and the lingering pain of my recovery, grew unbearable. The days blurred together after that. I couldn't sleep. Every time Evan's phone buzzed, I felt my chest tighten. He'd silence it instantly, turn away, and claim it was work. But one night, when he left his phone charging on the counter and went upstairs, I saw it light up again. Unknown number. For missed calls. Something inside me snapped. My hands shook as I scrolled through the call history. The same number had appeared dozens of times, at odd hours, late nights, early mornings. I dialed it before I could stop myself. A woman's voice answered the voicemail. Calm. Controlled. This is Marianne Blake. Leave a message. The name burned itself into my mind. I didn't recognize it, but it carried weight, like something out of a memory I hadn't yet faced. The next morning, I told Graham. He paused for a long time before speaking. Clara, that name came up in the secondary police logs. Marianne Blake, she's the widow of the pedestrian who was hit that night. The one who didn't make it. I felt the air leave my lungs. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Marianne Blake. A widow. A life taken. And somehow, all of it was tied to the night I lost mine, at least, the life I used to know. It was Marianne who had been calling Evan repeatedly, leaving messages filled with veiled threats. She wanted answers. She wanted accountability. And she clearly knew something that I didn't. I couldn't stop thinking about her, imagining her voice, her grief, the fury she must feel, and how she could see something I could not. The notes, the whispers, the secrecy, everything converged toward her. And yet, Evan never spoke of her. Never mentioned a widow, never admitted that someone had been injured, much less died. I realized that my recovery wasn't just about healing my body or adjusting to the reflection I no longer recognized. It was about reclaiming the truth that had been withheld from me, piece by piece, clue by clue. Each discovery, each subtle inconsistency, fueled a fire inside me, a fire that could not be extinguished by fear, by doubt, or by Evan's quiet insistence that I remain passive. The notes, the blacked-out lines, the secretive calls, the pattern of behavior, all of it led me to one inescapable conclusion: someone had orchestrated a lie around that night. And if I didn't uncover it, the consequences wouldn't just affect me. They would reach far beyond, touching the life of the person who had been lost, the widow left behind, and perhaps even the man I thought I could trust. I began spending hours on the phone with Graham, reviewing every possible angle, every lead. We checked witness accounts, cross-referenced timelines, and even traced the calls that Evan had received. Each step revealed fragments, half-truths, and hidden motivations. And then, finally, a name surfaced repeatedly in the logs: Marianne Blake. I didn't know what Marianne wanted exactly, but I understood this: she had leverage. She knew more than I did. And Evan, who had been my protector, my husband, my closest ally, was suddenly at the center of a storm I could neither control nor fully comprehend. The tension in the house became unbearable. Evan, who had once been a constant presence at my side, now seemed like a stranger. His eyes flickered with an unspoken urgency whenever Marianne's name surfaced in my mind. I watched him carefully, noting every gesture, every pause, every word, searching for the truth behind his calm facade. It was then that I received another note, this one smaller, sharper, more deliberate than the first. The truth isn't always what you want it to be. My hands shook as I read it. The words cut through the fog of confusion and fear, leaving me raw, exposed, and more determined than ever. The pieces were falling into place, but the final picture remained obscured, just out of reach. And in that obscurity, I felt a mix of dread and resolve. I realized I had to confront the reality I had been avoiding. I had to face the accident, the secrets, and the man who had insisted he was keeping me safe. Marianne Blake was a key I couldn't ignore, a link between the past I barely remembered and the future I had yet to reclaim. Each step I took, each inquiry I made, each quiet observation brought me closer to a revelation I knew would shatter everything. The truth behind the crash was waiting, hidden beneath layers of lies, guilt, and fear. And when it finally emerged, it would change my life, and Evan's, forever. I didn't decide to go to Marianne's house. It just happened. One moment, I was staring at that last note, and the next, I was in a cab, watching the city lights blur past the window. I hadn't been inside a car since the accident. My palms were sweating. My chest felt tight. But some part of me knew I couldn't hide from the road forever. Parked across from a modest brick home at the edge of town. The air smelled like rain. The house looked small, almost fragile, tucked behind a white fence that needed paint. The garden was overgrown, wild roses, tangled ivy, the kind of neglect that grows only where grief lives. I didn't even have to knock. Marianne opened the door as if she'd been expecting me. Her eyes told me she had. She was maybe a few years older than me, with silver at her temples and deep lines etched across her forehead, not from age, but from sleepless nights. Her voice trembled when she said my name. Clara. Just that. As if she'd practiced it 100 times before. We sat in her kitchen, 2 mugs of tea untouched between us. The clock ticked softly on the wall. "I'm sorry for the notes," she said finally. "I didn't want to frighten you. I just didn't know how else to reach you." I studied her face, the pain resting behind every word. "You were the one calling my husband," I said quietly. Her eyes flickered. "Yes. I called him many times. I thought he'd come forward eventually." A pause. "He didn't." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, newspaper clippings, a death certificate, and a photo of a smiling man holding a small dog. "My husband," she said, touching the photo. "Daniel. He was walking home that night. He never made it." My breath caught. I looked at the photo again, a kind face, a winter scarf, eyes full of life. That was the man. The pedestrian. "I don't remember any of it," I whispered. "They said I was driving." Marianne shook her head slowly. "You weren't." The words didn't register. Not at first. But then something inside me shifted, like the ground giving way. She leaned forward, her voice steady now, heavy with certainty. Your husband was behind the wheel. I saw him. I was standing by the corner, waiting for Daniel. Your car came out of nowhere, speeding. It hit him before he could move. You were in the passenger seat. I felt my heart pounding against my ribs. No. Evan told me. I know what he told you, she said gently. He lied. But I saw everything. The room tilted. My hands trembled as I closed the folder, pushing it away as if it burned. Why tell me this now? I asked, my voice cracking. Why send the notes? Marianne's eyes softened, but her expression didn't. Because I can't sleep. Because every night, I see that car, that flash of light, and I wonder how you can live beside him, not knowing what really happened. She swallowed hard. And because I lost my husband that night. But you lost the truth. The drive home was a blur. Every mile, every flicker of the streetlights sliced through me like a blade. Evan's voice echoed in my head, you lost control of the car, Clara. You hit the railing. But now, that sentence sounded different. It wasn't comfort. It was a script. A rehearsed lie. When the cab pulled into our driveway, Evan's car was already there. The porch light spilled onto the wet pavement, casting long shadows across the yard. He was sitting on the couch when I walked in, reading, or pretending to. He looked up, startled. Clara? Where have you been? I stood by the door, my hands shaking so hard I had to clench them into fists. I went to see her, I said. His expression froze. Marianne Blake. For a long moment, silence. Then, slowly, he set the book down. You shouldn't have done that. There are moments in marriage when silence is louder than any scream. That was one of them. I want the truth, Evan, I said. Not the version you've been feeding me. The real one. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling deeply. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? My voice broke. By lying to me? By letting me live with a guilt that wasn't mine? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time since the accident, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't recognized before. Not pity. Not fear. Guilt. He stood up, his voice low. You weren't driving, Clara. I was. The air left my lungs. For a moment, the world went silent, just the hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of the clock. I don't understand, I whispered. He nodded slowly, his voice trembling. It was raining that night. We argued about money, about everything. You wanted to walk home. I wouldn't stop. I kept driving faster. I was angry. And then, he stepped into the road. He closed his eyes. I hit him. My knees went weak. I leaned against the table, gripping its edge. He continued, each word a confession and a punishment. You hit your head when we crashed. You were unconscious. I thought you were gone, Clara. And when the police came, I panicked. I told them you were driving. He looked at me, tears streaking down his face. I thought if they believed you were behind the wheel, they'd go easy, because of your injuries. I told myself it was to protect you. But it wasn't. I was scared. I was a coward. Time stopped. All the nights he stayed by my bedside, all the whispered phone calls, the guilt, the distance, it all made sense now. He wasn't the villain I had painted in my mind. He wasn't cheating. He wasn't hiding another woman. He wasn't cruel. But he had destroyed something that could never be repaired, not out of malice, but out of fear. I sank onto the chair, my chest tightening with a grief I didn't have a name for. He came closer, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said softly. "Please, don't." He stopped. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Only the sound of rain against the window filled the silence. Then, quietly, I said, "You didn't just scar me, Evan. You scarred yourself." He nodded. "I know. I just wanted to protect you from me." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, touching the walls, the framed photos, the quiet spaces that had once felt like safety. Now they were just witnesses. At dawn, I called Marianne. I told her I finally knew. That I was sorry for her loss, and that maybe, in some strange way, both our lives had been destroyed by the same man's fear. I didn't excuse him. But I couldn't hate him either. Because loving someone doesn't disappear when truth arrives, it just changes shape. We all carry truths we wish we could bury. But the thing about buried things is, they always grow roots. Evan's lie shattered our lives, but it also forced me to face something deeper, that love built on silence can never survive. Marianne lost her husband. I lost the woman I used to be. But maybe, in the wreckage, we both found something else, the courage to live with the truth, no matter how much it hurts. The house was quiet that night. Not peaceful, just quiet in that way grief can be, when every clock tick feels like a question you can't answer. Evan had fallen asleep on the couch. I stood by the window. I noticed my reflection in the window. The scars on my face caught the morning light, softer now, less cruel. And for the first time in months, I didn't look away. When I looked at him that night, really looked at him, I saw a man already punished by his own conscience. His shoulders bent under the weight of it. His eyes hollow from months of pretending. And some bridges, once burned, are not meant to be rebuilt. So I made my choice. Next day afternoon, I picked up my car keys from the counter. My hand trembled for a moment. The air inside the car was thick, heavy, like the first breath after a long cry. But I turned the ignition anyway. The engine came to life, a low hum that sounded almost like courage. Then I smiled, not because I had forgotten the fear, but because I had learned to live with it. As I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. The road stretched out ahead, open, quiet, forgiving. Because I finally understood, healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to drive again, even when the road still scares you. And this time, I drove. If my story touched your heart, leave a comment below, tell us what you think forgiveness truly means. And if you believe that healing can begin even after the deepest wounds, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need it today. And subscribe for more stories that remind us it's never too late to begin again.